Their mom was my favorite. It's funny back because Harvey, he heard that he broke the window with his buddies with all the girls. All the story people came in. He's uptown, leaning against a window. One of the parts pushes the window breaks. So the next thing is a phone call to grandfather saying, oh, and she had all small scrunchie. And then they found out that means that these short sheep. I never heard of that. What was that? Greenville brought short girls home, and Harvey went on his way to embarrass her.
I like it when he said, my mother always said, Jane, I tell you, she had more than Sharon together. I'm like, thank you, mother. Sharon and I needed to know that. But anyway, and so if she have a boyfriend come over and they said, does your sister like anybody else? And I said, I'd say maybe for a quarter or 50 cents. I'll know that.
That's right.
You may know the offer back.
You better have her. You know, a lot of you, you're going up. By yourself.
Yeah. I told Jim and Sharon on the way here, my
I found out today.
best
Grew up in
friend,
301 Harrison, who lived there for a while. I didn't.
if you know anybody who needs those services.
On Easter, and then we went on Harrison, and somehow I have a scar over there. Well, I found all this out. I found out 1922 buildings.
Oh, yeah, I do. I remember. You didn't see that though, did he?
I didn't know where it was. I didn't know where it was. Yeah. I remember seeing.
I never heard that Harvey was short.
I think that's, I saw him when she, and then I thought,
I was stand on that ledge.
my lips, they went in the corner.
I think he saw that.
They sold it in the 30s or 40s. The mom and
He go out there and he
that's
let
what
me stand out there. I mean, if we
you were there, there's karma and stuff.
But I would just
You
stand
were
by
there
the
for
wall.
like 3 or 4 years. You killed the house while I lived here. She built that. When your dad did the drawing on the house. Oh, I think he never do it again because right after, or he had helped with the house rock. Yeah. And then he helped with
Yeah, he likes it.
Oh, yeah. Was he tried to get to decide right? I got a 4 it's like clearing first. Even never get that. I said, I'll pay it.
That's mine, because he felt like we were gonna get divorced after.
But I'll get a better my kids and said. But anyway, I didn't know it was like that. The drawing for that. Then what you're doing that 60. Yeah, we were there. I just finished junior college. I went to even though it was 200 yards away. It was such a good location. Wow. I'm ready.
My daughter now says, well, he didn't see it.
Yeah.
He's so good. Oh, really? He's on, yeah, he's really good at all. And I'll
Yeah.
so when I.
Oh, last Christmas? 2 Christmas.
I said, Mom, I said, yes, Mom says. Mom says, we're
Yeah,
best
he's
friends.
on Mercer Island.
And I sure my best friend is my
Excuse me. Oh, you guys, you're seeing.
Settle down.
He knows me. Isolating him from that. You want to sit up here?
You'll be separated.
Please, if I can have you all rise.
You tried to just climb up in.
There we go. Thank you. OH. Thank you. If you would be seated, we're going to have Brian Bennett start here. This is kind of a bittersweet day for me. Harvey and I go back decades, and I've never met a nicer, kinder gentleman. And sharing stories about his motorcycle adventures and mine. And I will miss his raspy ass voice. Isn't it just special? So thank you for the honor of being here for not only your family, but for my good friend Harvey. And with that, Brian Bennett.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is truly an honor to be able to be with you. I know that 2020 has just been so hard, and to pile a loss on top of all of that makes it all that much harder. But I do respect you so much for being able to pull together. I know the hope is to do a larger service sometime when all of this lifts. But I think it's so important for closure and healing to be able to come together today. And I do want to come clean. I think I told Jim and his family, I'm from Illinois, so today was going to be a big battle between the Buckeyes and my Fighting Illini. But I think it's ironic that they canceled the game, and we'll say in honor of Harvey today. So, but it's really special to be here today. I think as we get older, let's be honest, we start to ask ourselves some of the more reflective questions. And one of those questions is, did my life matter? Am I making a difference? With the people that I was given to love and the people that I'm trying to love back, is it making any difference at all? And I heard from both the boys, and a few moments ago, Bob, it sounds like Harvey made a difference in the years that he had. Probably in ways that you'll never know. It just sounded like, as I heard the story, and came earlier to watch the pictures, and I've heard from TR so many great things about him. We don't use the word gentleman in the truest sense of the form, but that's what strikes me as I hear his story. Now, I'm a big believer in something that I call holy collisions. And what I mean by that is there are certain times in our life, if you think back over your life, that you ran into the exact right person at the exact right moment in your life for the exact right reason. I mean, you might be sitting next to a holy collision of yours right now. And you go back to that very first moment you met. What was that? What was that spark that you saw whether it's a spouse or a significant friend or whatever, what was it that made you push through that? And, I enjoyed hearing the story about the two women in Harvey's life. Donna representing, I think, 25 years of marriage, and Judy, 37. And those are two holy collisions. If I do the math right, that means he was married for 62 years of his life. That's a long time and two significant chapters. But, TR and I get to do this so much with families. I consider this right now, what we're doing right now, is its own version of a holy collision. There's really no reason why we can explain this group sitting in this room on this day at this time, other than the connection that you all have with Harvey. And let's be honest, when we parked our cars a little bit ago, every one of us are worried. There's things that we're thinking about and worried about because of this COVID craziness. And we had to leave that all in the car for a few minutes. And we get to pause and for the next few moments, be able to reflect on the life lessons that Harvey taught by the way he lived his life. And that's our goal today. My hope whenever we do a service like this is that we all get to leave better than we showed up, simply because we got to pay respect to a gentleman who really did a great job of living his life for 9 decades. That blows my mind. I think Jeff and I were talking, if you think about the changes in that generation, there will always be changes in any century, but the significant changes of what Harvey must have seen over the course of his lifetime is kind of mind-blowing if you think about it. I want to share a short reading, and then we're going to have the boys come up. It says, I have my own notion of grief. I thought it was the sad time that followed the death of someone you love, and you just had to push through it, just get to the other side. But I'm learning that there is no other side. There is no pushing through, but rather there is absorption, adjustment, and acceptance. And grief is not something you ever complete. It's just something you endure. Grief is not a task to finish and move on from, but an element of yourself. It's an alteration of your being. It's a new way of seeing the world. And I don't care if the person's 90 and somewhat expected, or 19 and it's a shock. Loss is loss. And one thing that I've learned over the years is there is no right or wrong way to grieve. There's just your way to grieve. And the best gift that you can give each other as friends and family is to let each other grieve the way that you need to grieve, because this is going to trigger different emotions for everybody here. And obviously, I didn't have the privilege of knowing him. I promise you I've met him somewhere. I was telling Jim that I've met him and I cannot place it, but I did not have the privilege of knowing his story. So for the next couple of minutes, I think, Jim, I'm going to have you come first. And then Jeff, if you would follow him, that would be good. So Jim?
Jane wanted to say something too, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Very short.
Absolutely, yeah.
I saw it first, you made me asleep. So, anybody wants coffee first? You better just now. Well, I wrote this out so I can say what I wanted to say. It's about Harvey James Pierce Jr. Harvey Pierce was born in Dayton, Ohio in 1930. His parents were Harvey James Pierce Sr. D.O. and Lillian Mae Manuel Pierce. Tragically, his mother died in childbirth with him, and he was brought home to Greenville, Ohio by his mourning father and older sister Peggy to begin his life there. Harvey Sr. had an active medical practice in Greenville and needed help. He advertised in the paper for a nanny, and this is when Ruth Clark, at the age of 19, joined their household to help raise Harvey. At the time, Harvey's senior sister, Helen, was in Kirksville, Missouri, finishing medical school there. He asked her to return to Greenville after she finished her school to help at the practice. In 1931, Harvey Sr. bought a house for Helen and his parents, Wilson and Viola Pierce. The parents moved from their Dayton home to Greenville, and in 1932, Helen returned to Greenville with her 3 children, where she moved into this house with her parents. This was Harvey's extended family during his formative years. Harvey had many adventures growing up. When he was in kindergarten, Helen and Viola took him on a shopping trip to Dayton. On the way home, when Harvey was taking a nap in the back seat, Helen missed a curve and the car ended up in a cornfield. Viola and Helen were mildly injured and shook up. A passerby picked them up and drove them back to Greenville. They suddenly remembered that they had forgotten Harvey. Upon a frantic return to the car, they found Harvey unconscious on the floor of the car. His head had struck the middle footrest when he flew off the seat, and he had sustained a skull fracture. Harvey remembers how great this was for him, since there was a cardboard train at school, and only the best students got to be the conductor on the train as a reward for good behavior. For once, he got to be the conductor because everyone felt sorry for him due to his bandaged head. Even at this young age, he saw a positive outcome from a bad situation. Harvey was friendly and outgoing. His father started his piano lessons by the time he was 8. He showed early artistic talent. He set up his own darkroom in the basement of their home and took many photographs. He took chances and was curious. For example, he and a friend stripped the insulation off of a wire, plugged it into his bedroom 110-volt AC outlet, and then would see who could hold on to the live wire the longest. In this particular case, the loser was the winner. He was in the marching band in school and was an assistant trainer for the football team. He was independent and gallant. His father tried to keep a tight rein on him and constantly urged him to study. But Harvey was one to surreptitiously find a way to bend if not break his father's rules. When he began dating our mother, Donna, he was a senior and she was a junior. When he was supposed to be in his room studying, he managed to always place a ladder next to his second floor bedroom window, where he would climb down every evening to walk Donna home from her drugstore job to her home on Water Street. He amazingly never got caught. By 1942, Harvey Sr. and Ruth were married, and in 1947, Harvey was joined by a new sister, Jane. She idolized him as her third parent. He went to school at Ohio State University. His father wanted him to be a doctor. Harvey proceeded to perform poorly in the pre-med subjects he had signed up for, and his father finally relented and let him pursue his passion to be an architect. He bought a Jeepster and also had a secret motorcycle that he loaned to a friend one day. His friend crashed the motorcycle, and Harvey found it on fire in a field. He was able to repair it and continued to pursue his daredevil ways. He had a fascination with fireworks and explosives. That is, until he blew a hole in the concrete floor of the OSU Stadium dome that held honor students, and was promptly removed from that living arrangement. A lot happened to Harvey in 1952. His father died of a heart attack in March. Harvey wrote to me in 1979 when I was in medical school about this. Quote, "I'm sure glad our family doesn't have the habit, smoking. I'm sure that's what accelerated Dad's death at 58. He was a great friend and was really good to me. I guess losing his wife at an early age must have broken his spirit and added to his nervousness. It seems that doctors have a certain drive which makes it tough on their bodies. I hope you always keep the same perspective on life. There's nothing that beats good health to enjoy every day." Harvey graduated from OSU and married Donna in September. They built a house in Greenville on Avenue E, and he commuted to Dayton to work. He worked several jobs to make ends meet and got little sleep. The commute became too much, and they moved to an apartment in Dayton. I was born in September the next year, and Harvey was now the responsible father and provider for a family at the age of 23. In 1956, Jeff was born, and we had to move to a house in Beaver Creek. Harvey and Donna were committed to giving us the best start in life, and were determined to move to Oakwood, which had a stellar school system. They bought a house on Wonderly Avenue in Oakwood, and he and Donna gutted the house and built a large addition on the rear of the house. It was a tremendous project for them, and it seemed like I grew up in a construction zone. Their work paid off, and they were very proud that the house had a full write-up in the Dayton Daily News in 1966. My dad was indulgent and had a playful side to him. We never wanted for toys. I recently went to a toy museum featuring the most popular toys of the 1950s and 60s. I suddenly realized that I was familiar with almost all of them because we had all of them. We had Mr. Machine, Astro Base, Light Right, Gilbert Chemistry Set, Erector Set, Mousetrap, Operation, Matchbox Cars, Firograph, Robot Commando, which cost $22 in 1962, HO Cars, Army Men, Monopoly, Broadside, Creepy Critters, Cap Guns, Models, Trolls, Hula Hoops, and the list goes on and on. It must have raised eyebrows in the family, for in 1962, Donna's younger sister wrote, "You spent more on toys for Jimmy and Jeff than any kids would ever need." Jeff and I were not complaining. They bought us bicycles early on, and this led to Jeff's and my obsession with bicycling that lasts to this day. My dad prepared us well for Armageddon when he built a bomb shelter after the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1961 in the old coal room of our house. He bought us fireworks, BB guns, slingshots, and my first real gun, the .22. He gave me access to a can of gunpowder, which I used in a homemade cannon and rockets, all of which blew up in the pad. I don't remember any supervision of any of our activities, but he did have an incredibly loud whistle that had a 1 block range, which some of us hummed at supper. He gave us shovels to dig a hideout as deep as we wanted behind our garage. A treehouse was promised but never built. I think my mom put her foot down on that one. I remember taking my model boats, putting firecrackers in them, placing them into a large tub of water and pouring gasoline into the water. After lighting the gasoline, the resulting conflagration and explosions would have done Steven Spielberg and my dad proud. He gave us unusual projects with a chart that gave a gold star for each completed task. He was a surveyor early in his career and had me survey our block and draw dimensions and maps from the survey. He took us camping with the scouts, trips to the museums and historical sites in the East, and gave us the confidence to do things on our own and a curiosity to explore and learn. Harvey was a collector. He had a large collection of whistles, mallets, and clutter. He could pack more into a small space than anyone. Venturing into the garage or his basement office, which was called Suite B, involved turning sideways and shuffling between the rows of boxes, books, tools, computers, and receipts for everything they ever bought. A network of extension cords were meticulously strung throughout the basement to power his entire basement complex. On one occasion, the Oakwood Fire Department entered the basement to check on a potential gas leak and immediately declared the whole place a fire hazard. When Sharon and I were cleaning out the garage last year and peeled back the layers, it was like an archaeological dig. We found at least 5 complete toolboxes. As each toolbox was buried, he would just buy a new one and stock it to use until it too was buried by time and things. Harvey had an incredible work ethic. In the 60s, he worked long hours with Lawrence and Williams, spent his free time working in the house, and still found the time to study for the architectural boards to become a certified architect and engineer. His work and talent paid off, and he was made a full partner at his architectural firm. He liked the engineering aspect probably more than the design part. At his firm, he designed many commercial buildings for GM, hospitals, and office buildings. The pinnacle of his career was the Winners Bank building that still is the tallest and most striking of Dayton's buildings. He also was part of the design team for the Fawcett Center at Ohio State and the NCR World headquarters in Dayton. He did some work on the side for private clients, including Mrs. Kettering, who once prepared him a sandwich while they were flying on her personal jet. It always amazed him that she would serve him. He had the unique experience of designing a protective structure for the Wright Flyer 3 at Carillon Park when the building was being upgraded. He himself had been oracled at his home in Oakwood in the early 40s. In Oakwood, he served on the zoning board and designed the Oakwood Community Center's pool and grounds. He designed his own beach house on Sunset Beach in North Carolina and worked steadily until his mid-80s. His work served as his escape from the stresses of life and filled his life with purpose. In 1980, Donna died after a year-long battle of cancer. He was devastated and wrote that he hated being alone. He couldn't sleep and would go on walks at 3 in the morning with his flashlight. Fortuitously, he renewed contact with Judy King, who had worked in his office at one point, was divorced, and was then living with her 2 children in North Carolina. After a whirlwind courtship, they were married in the summer of 1981 in North Carolina. My dad was attracted to strong, independent women. Integrating the families was a complex process and went well for a number of years as Harvey focused on his new family. Harvey hated conflict and would avoid it at all costs. His letter to me in 1979 gave me a rare insight into his personal philosophy when he wrote, quote, "If you've got anything bugging you, it's better to avoid it if you can't change it." This attitude, for the most part, served him well for the majority of his 37-year marriage to Judy, and they were very happy together. After Judy died in 2018, I was able to spend time with him again, and the warmth of our relationship returned and deepened. We spent many hours looking at old family photos, reading family letters, and sharing stories about the past. Unfortunately, his mind and body were failing him, and he was restricted to the confines of nursing home as the COVID crisis raged. I last saw him a week and a half ago. and he seemed more tired than usual. He still managed his upbeat smile as we said our goodbyes for the last time. And what deeply in this optimistic spirit, and depth of love, the closest and only he is my Father to provide. So a postscript here. In December 1968, Jim Hubble was on Apollo 8, a quarter million miles from Earth, looking back on this tiny globe of life in the blackness of space. It opened up a new perspective for him, and he later said, "You have to really think about our own existence here in the universe," he said. "You realize that people often say, 'I hope to go to heaven when I die.' In reality, if you think about it, you go to heaven when you're born." I've been thinking about the impact of funerals on families. It is obvious that there's a lot of stress, grief, and emotional vulnerability that occurs during the entire process. This seems to have one of two effects. It can drive families apart or it can bring them together. I've seen both things happen. I hope that Harvey's death is of the sort that unifies us and enriches our family heritage, giving us the hope that we can appreciate one another more than ever while we're present in heaven. I know that Harvey would look this for us more than anything. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Since my dad's death, every single verbal or written condolence has not failed to emphasize a true quality of his friendliness as well as his generosity. He fully embodied those qualities, but he was so much more. My dad was an easygoing man and did not fret the small stuff. He liked for everyone to get along, and it was rare he would lose control, and if he did, it was for a good reason. For example, I remember he took us to an observatory in Hills and Dales Park. It's like a medieval tower. And just as we were about to go in, a couple of huge rocks came crashing down from above. And well, he immediately ran up to the top of the tower and he screamed at the top of his lungs at the both idiots who threw the rocks. And his reaction really shocked me. But the more I thought about it, it also showed me how much he loved us and wanted to protect us. And my dad was very open-minded. This quality was reflected by books in his library at home. And his books covered many diverse subjects, such as it included subjects like fine art, warplanes, magic, mysteries, Western, science fiction, Buddhism, carpentry, and on and on. And so if you were lucky enough to have a conversation with him, you were in for a treat because he was very well read. And while generally a genial man, he could exercise discipline when need be. When my friends and I think we were about 10 years old, we were in our driveway setting off fireworks, and our neighbor across the street would on the slide give us M80s and silver salutes, which were the worst kind of fireworks and the loudest. And so we would set those off in the driveway. And one year when we did it on the 4th, the Oakland police roared up into our driveway. Must have been our bad luck for him to be going down our street just when we were setting them off. But anyway, he came running up the driveway. And of course, we all ran for the hills and left my poor dad to face the music. And of course, the result, I think I was grounded for a week. And then when my friends tested
me and my friends tested a match lighting and launching contraption made from clothespins. And as a result of the test, we started a huge leaf fire. It worked. It was pretty cool. It resolved, surrounded again for a week. And then when I threw a snowball at a car and was brought home by the Oakwood police, resolved, at this time it was 2 weeks around. That was pretty bad. So although I wasn't real happy with his efforts to reform me, I now see he was teaching a very important life lesson. That you must, really, you have to accept responsibility for your actions. And my dad was an impressive artist. He painted an abstract mural on his stepmom Ruth's garage wall that just fascinated me every time I looked at it. It was something else. And he was a master at decorating birthday card envelopes, and his decorations on envelopes always ended up being actually better than the card itself. And I remember more than once a teacher at grade school, after I turned in a project that had dealt with art, anything creative, he would ask me, "Did your father help you on this?" And they just sort of smiled when they said that to me, because my dad would get carried away with school projects that anything that dealt with art. He had. So that was pretty funny. And he just really enjoyed helping my brother and I at school projects that required at least a bit of creativity. And he would always get excited. I remember when I was a scout, the highlight of his year would, and mine, I guess, at that point in time would be when the Pinewood Derby came around. We would enter that, and we wouldn't prioritize the fast design at all, but rather how artistic and creative we could get with the car. Some examples were, one year we made the Monkey Mobile, another year we made the Batmobile, and our crowning achievement was the Monster Mobile. I don't know if you guys remember, you might be too young for it. It was the sitcom back in the 60s about a Frankenstein monster and his family. They were all very lovable monsters. And the Monster Mobile was basically like a coffin on wheels, a double-decker coffin. And we always came in last, but we did it with style. And one of my dad's greatest pleasures was going to Greenville. I loved going up there with him and my mom, brother, and he loved to visit with his relatives and friends up there. And sort of, when I was young, going there sort of reminded me of Mayberry from TV. There were many unique characters in Greenville, some who were amusing and some that gave me pause for concern. And it was always fun going there, and all the unique and special people I met there helped me to feel confident in myself and not worry too much about what other people really think of you. Just, my dad was big on that, just be yourself. So, and Andy, my dad was a really good man and a great father. And I will always thank my lucky stars for the very loving upbringing he and my mom gave us. I will miss him.
Very good.
Mine is very short, but it says how I feel. My daughter-in-law tells me that my 2-year-old grandson and I are always going to be best friends. And I tell him on Skype, which he doesn't really understand, that he doesn't know that when I was his age, my first best friend was my big brother. And Jim brought many times when we visit Harvey at the nursing home, letters that Daddy wrote every Sunday to Harvey at Ohio State. And just about every letter is some comment about how much Jane misses you. And that I would run to the window and say, Harvey's car gone. Or I'd run to the stairs when it was time to have dinner and call him to come down. And so I like to think that Harvey's car will never be really gone because he'll always be in my heart. And I like the movie Hope Floats. And at the very end, the Sandra Bullock character says, life is in 3 stages. The first part, she said, you spend a lot of your life learning to deal with. The end is usually very sad, but it's the middle. That's the part that's the best. And so I will like to remember the middle. I love you so much, and I will miss you in this life. There, the day I was born, I have almost a 74-year relationship with my brother. I loved him dearly, and I'm very thankful he knew that. Thank you.
Anybody else? That was powerful. Just 3 glimpses of I don't think, as a dad, I have 3 boys, and I don't think a dad could be more proud than to have his 2 sons, his sister. So powerful what you said as well. And, and that's why today is so important, even in the midst of all this craziness, to be able to come together. Because I was struck, I could have listened to you 2 talk all day, because the childhood you painted doesn't exist anymore. That world that you grew up in, that we grew up in, you leave house first thing in the morning and maybe not show up again until dark. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist anymore. And the thing that I was struck about as I talked to both of you earlier this week, but even as I heard you today, is, usually architect, engineer types don't really have the ornery side. But Harvey seemed to have nailed both completely and passed that on. I think that's a heritage that his ability, and it seems like pyrotechnics was a common theme throughout your all life somehow. But what a great package to be able to have both of those sides, the responsibility side, but also tied together with the adventurous side, because that goes so long. And you've just painted a picture of and I don't remember which of the boys said this, but I thought this was so poignant. You said he was not really one to give advice. He just let life teach, that he was there to support. And that's a powerful way to parent. It's hard not to get too micromanaging as a parent and get too involved, and just let life be the teacher. But it sounds like that's exactly what he did. One thing that wasn't mentioned, but I think I heard, I can't remember who, just that he adored the grandchildren and the 2 great-grandchildren. And that'll bring back, that'll bring, if you have a best friend that's a 2-year-old, that'll bring out the best of who you are.
He always loved children.
Did he?
From the time he was a teenager. I was very lucky.
Yeah. So what was the age gap?
He was 16 and a half when I was
Wow.
born. He was there the day I was born. He went with Mom and Daddy to the hospital, and I was lucky.
Yeah.
Little kid.
That's great that you were able to be so close with that kind of an age difference.
He loved children, and I loved him, and it really just worked. And my dad's letters to him, I was surprised how I felt really showed as a little kid.
Yeah.
I didn't understand where he was at 2 years old. He'd gone to college,
And it sounds like family was always, I think we were talking earlier about the infamous Thanksgiving gatherings that you all were able to have. And it sounds like there was a little OSU Michigan stuff going on in the backdrop of some of those. But being able to gather at a church that he had a hand in designing and having a big party like that. But family just seems like the common theme from what I'm hearing. And as I close, I really believe that in this lifetime, we're born one time, but we die 2 times. And the first time we die is a physical death. And that's now unfortunately happened. But let's be honest, it's going to happen to every one of us in this room. We don't know when, where, or how, but we know it's going to happen. But the second time we die is more tragic, because the second time we die is the last time anybody ever says our name out loud. It's the last time anybody ever tells one of our stories. And it's really up to this group and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren to let the great-great-grandchildren and the great-great-great-grandchildren, make sure that his story doesn't die. Make this beautiful collection of pictures that you have rolling. Get a copy of that, because as you know, if you've lost somebody, that first year or so is really the hardest, because we're right on top of the first holidays. There will be a first birthday, a first everything will come up, and your day will be flying along a year from now, and out of the blue, you may hear the Ohio State song, something will happen, and all of a sudden you'll think of Harvey. And my encouragement is that when that happens, just call time out on what you're doing and let that moment do what that moment's supposed to do. Put that disc back in the player and watch it, because those pictures are powerful. They each represent a moment. I'd like to close, and I wasn't sure I was going to do this, but both your letters kind of inspired me. I hope this honors the way that Harvey lived his life. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard, and I hope that it catches the spirit of the way that Harvey lived his life. It was given by Anna Quinlan to a group of graduates at Villanova University one afternoon. And this is only part of it, but it's so powerful. She said, "We walk out of here this afternoon with the only one thing that no one else has. There will be hundreds of people out there with your same degree. There will be thousands of people that do what you do for a living. But you will be the only person alive who has sole custody of your life, your particular life, your entire life. Not just your life at a desk or on a bus or in a car or at the computer. Not just the life of your mind, but the life of your heart. Not just your bank account, but your soul. People don't talk about the soul very much anymore because it's much easier to write a resume than it is to craft a spirit. But a resume is a cold comfort on a winter night, or when you're sad or broke or lonely, or when you've gotten back the test results and they're not so good." So she said, "Here's my resume. I try to be a good parent. I've never let my profession stand in the way of being a good parent. I no longer consider myself the center of the universe. I show up, I listen, and I try to laugh. I'm a good friend to my friends, and they are to me. Without them, there would be nothing to say to you today, because I would be a cardboard cutout. But I call them on the phone when I can. I meet them for lunch. I write them letters. I show up, I listen, and I try to laugh. I would be rotten or at best mediocre at my work if those other things were not true, because you cannot really be first rate at your work if your work is all you are. So here's what I wanted to tell you today. Here may be what Harvey would tell us today. Get a life. Get a real life. Not just a manic pursuit of the next promotion or a bigger paycheck or a larger house. Do you think you'd care so very much about those things if you blew an aneurysm one afternoon or found a lump in your breast? Get a life in which you're not alone. Find people that you can love and people that will love you back. And remember that love is not leisure. It is really hard work. So pick up the phone, send an email, write a letter, kiss your mom, hug your dad. Get a life in which you are generous and realize that life is the best thing ever, and we have no business taking it for granted." She said it's so easy to exist instead of live, and I learned this many years ago because something really, really bad happened to me, something that if I had my choices would have never happened at all, but it has taught me the greatest lesson of my life. I learned to love the journey and not the destination. I learned that life is not a dress rehearsal, and today is the only guarantee we get. I try to meet everybody I tell them this advice: consider the lilies of the field. Look at the fuzz on the back of a baby's ear. Read a book in the backyard with the sun shining in your face and learn to be happy. And think of life as a terminal illness, because if you do, you will live it with joy and passion as it ought to be lived. And it sounds like to me that's how Harvey lived 9 decades of his life. I think you said it correctly, Jim. A funeral, a life celebration service, can do one of two things. Everybody can just come and go as if nothing ever happened. Or it can be a time of healing that brings people together. And the best legacy that you can leave for your dad, for your brother, for whoever he was to you, is to make sure that you live your life the way that he would have lived his. And it sounds like you were able to be blessed by a really special man. I'd like to close with a brief word of prayer, and I'm gonna turn it back over to you. God, I thank you for this holy collision of family that have gathered together today. I thank you for the impact that Harvey was able to have probably on countless people that we're not even aware of. And I do pray that after all this craziness dies down, that the family and friends who knew him best will be able to come together at a later time. But God, I do thank you that today was kind of a private time just to be together and honor his story. So I pray today as we leave that we are better than we were when we showed up a little bit ago, simply because of the life and lessons and legacy of Harvey. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Brian. He's really good at that stuff. Isn't he? I'm sorry about
No, you're
messing
fine.
with your dog. I
He just doesn't
forgot
like
about my
beeping.
whistle. You know, your dad and your grandfather would love it. Yeah, so this now, thank you so much again for being here with my good friend Harvey, and I wish you all the best. And please travel safely home. If you got enough time here, if you want to visit some more, please do so. For all of those grandkids that said they were going to listen, we wish you were here, but we understand why you're not. So we just wish everybody the most happy and safe as we can be at this point in time. So thanks again for being here. We're going to play a couple of songs you might recognize.
Can I say something?
Allison,
Pardon?
can she say something still?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, I just didn't know if I was gonna be able to, and then thought of some stuff. Thanks. I was like, the music was kind of hard to get over, but, I just wanted to.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
take care of it.
thanks. Sorry, I get distracted.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine. I didn't know if I was, I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to say something. Yeah, my grandfather was always really a special, warm person. I don't think I'll ever forget his voice either, but a moment that I remember that I spent just with him was when I was graduating, or when I was at Earlham College. We were kind of closer, so somehow we decided to go out to lunch, and he was always willing to try something new, and apparently he had never had Japanese food before, and that was so strange to me, but we went, and it was just a moment that I'll never forget, because we shared something special, just him and I. And I guess he grew up maybe rather conservative or something, like voted Republican a lot, but I was really impressed when he started to maybe look at the people more versus maybe more of monetary kind of decisions that were made. And I guess I just saw him grow and change, and his beliefs change. And in some of the pictures up here, I guess I was just always really impressed because of how welcoming he was to other people. And my boyfriend at the time was Iranian, and just how he completely embraced that. Like, that wasn't a problem or a conflict at all. Just really spoke to me about how loving and caring he could be towards other people, even from different backgrounds. And I will always remember that. And I guess that's just, I'm
really gonna miss that warmth. So, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Can I get back to the United States family?
Yeah. Oh, and he did start a tree house with me at my mom's house once, but it consisted of like 3 beams that never got finished. But so that kind of reminded me when you
Those
guys talked about the tree
beings
house.
were engineered extremely
That's
well.
right.
That's 3 beans.
Right.
They're still up.
Still sit in them.
They're just like, just start.
Yeah. Right now, you won't be able to read it. They did. I think. That's my sister. Oh, we will take it as
That copy
Jim will start up to type first.
Jim, if you send that to us, we can put that on the website.
Okay.
That'd be
There you go. Like,
info@Ralph's. Yeah, don't send to me. I
He doesn't want to try to.
don't look at you.
thank you for, well, thank you for helping out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ready to go.
Thank you.
I'll say go Bucks.